Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest joining us this morning.
My guy.
The brother Craig Melvin. Good morning.
Man, so good to see you. I've been a fan of the show for a long time, but I've been a fan of this guy even longer.
You know him for a long time.
Me and Craig go way
All right,
back.
so tell us, well, first of all, Craig, if you don't know, of course, he's a news anchor for NBC News Today. Now,
Tell him where you started, though, Craig. Where'd
Columbia,
you start?
South Carolina, baby.
Hey, 803, what's happening?
WIS-TV. And you were at that point, you were at Hot 103.9, the Jam.
Yeah, I was at the Big DM, then Hot 103.9.
That's right.
It wasn't the Jam, Craig.
What was it, Hot 103?
It was Hot 103.9, that's all.
Oh, what was the Jam?
Z93 Jams in Charleston.
That's right.
That's where I started.
Tell us some stories about Charlamagne that we might not know, since you guys go
No,
back.
here's the
back.
thing.
You don't want to do that.
Yes.
No, I don't want to do it.
Then I got stories
That's
on Craig.
mutual assured destruction. Not doing that. I will say, if you told either one of us 15, 20 years ago that this is where we would be, I would have laughed. I can't speak for Charlamagne.
I don't know. I think people kind of knew it because remember we were in the South Carolina State newspaper in 2003 or 4, and they named me and you two of the top 10, I think it was media personalities under the age of 30 in Columbia, South Carolina, and they did these profiles on us. I actually still have mine framed, and I did the 10 Commandments of hip hop, and Craig told a story, but I just remember him laying on the grass with a puppy licking his face.
That damn story comes up every
I'm
time.
just saying.
You had a puppy licking your face?
It's a long story. I had a dog back then named Trouble. They wanted to take a picture of me and my dog, and the picture that they happened to snap at the time was, but the dog didn't usually lick my face. He didn't sleep in the bed.
So you kissed the dog. You're a dog kisser.
I'm not a dog kisser. I've never kissed a dog.
That dog was definitely kissing you, Craig.
The dog may have licked me once, and the photographer just timed it perfectly.
Okay,
but I haven't heard the end of it.
That's your story. You're sticking
but
with
when
I
we
had
used-
that framed. I should have bought it.
I'm glad you didn't. But when we used to hang, this is before social media.
Right.
Yes.
So he would get off the air. I would get off the 11 o'clock news, and we would hit the club. And
Would you go with him to the strip clubs?
I've never been to that. I've never been.
Nah, we've been to this.
I have never. We would go to regular clubs.
Okay, I got you.
Regular nightclubs.
I think we went to the strip
that's
club
the thing.
like once, Craig.
Like that life he led back then, that would serve him well now. Like it gives him street cred.
Right.
That life I led back then, I don't need that life anymore. I don't need that life anymore.
I was with my girl though.
That's since high school.
Yeah.
Since high school.
That's a fact. That's a
Oh,
fact.
yeah.
But we used to go to V12. V12 used to be our spot. It used to be V12 in the Vista.
Goodness
Yeah,
gracious.
V12 in the Vista. But
missed
Craig,
out.
one thing I can say about Craig was always focused. You know what I mean? He was always mature.
Why'd you hang out with him then?
I needed street cred.
I got you.
Plus, he had a lot more fun than I was having. Like wherever he was, that's where the party
That's where
was.
the fun was happening.
Yes.
I do remember one time we was in the VIP. Craig is sitting there. Craig goes, "Oh my God, is that marijuana?
That's how he said
I gotta get out of here."
It's probably right. It's probably true. Probably true.
That is true. We used to have a good time.
So, Craig, how did you get into TV, man? What made you want to jump into TV and communications?
I was in high school. And I was watching a commercial one afternoon, and they were the local TV station. They were advertising for a high school reporter, our generation, and that's what they call the segment. You would work with the producer. You'd go out. You'd do these stories on like teens and seatbelt safety and sex and like SAT preparation. This was the station's attempt to try and attract a younger audience. So I would go out and do these stories, and I walked in the newsroom. I remember the first time, 1111 Bull Street in Columbia, South Carolina, and I was like, wow. This is cool. Like first time I'd been in a newsroom, and just the energy and these folks that I had grown up watching do the local news. They were all there, writing and interviewing. So I fell in love with news at an early age. I was 16 at the time. I went to college and studied government. And then when I got out of college, I graduated from a small liberal arts college in South Carolina, Wofford. And 2 weeks later, I started at the local TV station. That's been it. I just started as a photographer. Shot video, I produced. I wasn't very good at either one. And one day the station manager was like, "You want to be a reporter, right?" I said, "Well, yeah, eventually." He said, "Well, let's try it." And I used to do these morning segments for the local news called Craig Cam. Terrible TV. But people watched.
What was Craig Can?
So it's like, it's very hard to describe because it was so bad. But basically I would do early morning event promotion I would cover it. Like if there was news, I would go out and cover the car wreck or the house fire or whatever. But, at 4 in the morning in Columbia, South Carolina, there wasn't a lot of news. So I'd have to make it up. So I did a lot of, the state fairs coming to town. I would go and do 2.5 hours on, 2 3-minute segments promoting events. And so I had to learn very early in the business how to talk extemporaneously without a whole lot going on. And so when breaking news did happen eventually, I was prepared for it.
WIS was your first gig?
First gig.
Wow, I mean, WIS is, pretty legendary now because of you and, Rashida Jones came out of WIS.
Right.
Like, yeah, a lot of people came out of that
Rashida
station.
Jones, the only black president of a cable news operation. Not just now, ever.
Ever. Wow.
Yeah, she's the president of MSNBC. But yes, news director WIS.
What was the most difficult thing doing live hits? Like you see all the time, like you see the stories of the bug, the bee swinging the guy, and the guy swinging while he's live, or you see the rain pouring and the guy's out there and the rain is hitting him, the stop sign. What was the most difficult thing you had to do when you had to do a live hit? Anything crazy?
Yeah, it was, I got, the stories you at the fair and then the alligator, you hold the alligator and the alligator pees on you. That's happening.
What?
Yeah.
You was holding the alligator?
I was, back then, like 22, again, it's before the internet.
Okay.
Because you do things back then, you didn't have to worry about it, being viewed 10 million times.
That's right.
But no, the guy was, these alligators going to be at the state fair this year. You want to hold one, Craig? It's TV. I was like, oh, of course, I'll hold one. And there, I'm holding it out. It's like maybe 30 seconds in. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, what is that? And then I always say, oh, the alligator had an accident. So yeah, alligator pee. But
that video's out there somewhere. Somebody gonna post it now.
Somebody it right now.
Oh, you're probably right. I shouldn't have had no embarrassing moments. I had that.
Moments.
No, but you can't really control what people say.
Correct.
In live situations. So that's always been. I had a guy, one of our correspondents, a few months ago. Love him, Ken Delanian. He's our national intelligence security reporter. You could pull it up on the internet. But this is back at the height of the pandemic. Everybody's working from home, and you're gonna have to bleep this. I'm gonna give you a heads up. But Ken, we go to Ken for more on whatever the breaking news was, and Ken's got his earpiece in, and it's like, for more now we go to Ken Delanian. Awkward pause. Next thing we hear, oh shit, fuck. And I was like, you're in your basement sometimes. You don't think you hear. I was like, oh.
Did he just say shit fuck?
Right. And producer gets in my ears like, go to break. And I go to break and come back. And apparently, as I was going to Ken, someone was calling Ken at the same time. So his IFB cut out. And that was Ken's natural reaction. He didn't know he was on TV.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. But, that was an accident. But there have been other times in the past where some people say crazy stuff on live TV. And you don't really have a heads up.
Gotcha.
Well, listen, Craig is here because he has a new book out that came out Tuesday. It's called Pops. Learning to be a son and father. And the reason, I love this book for a number of reasons. Number one, because I know you, and I just love to hear, backstories of people from South Carolina. Because we don't have a lot of representation. Right? But you address a relationship that will always be complicated, probably the most complicated relationship a man can have, and that's the relationship we have with our father.
Yes.
What made you address that topic?
Well, a couple things, and I write about it in the book, but 2 years ago, my dad, after, 40 plus years of heavy drinking and gambling addiction, and he finally decided he was going to get some help. He was 67 years old at the time. And of the things of which I'm proud in my life, and there are a lot, it's top of the list. Like my dad deciding late in life that he wanted to live better. So after he got clean, he and I would have these conversations. He wanted his story to do some good, and I'm not a very public person. And I started, I talked to him about it, and we had probably 3 or 4 conversations. The publisher approached about writing a book on fatherhood. I didn't think anybody would read that book. The original idea was just a collection of stories of like fathers that I've covered over the years. And then the pandemic hit, and I've got 2 young children, and you have 3 daughters. When you have kids, you view the world differently.
That's right.
It changes your worldview. And as my kids were getting older, I started to think more about fatherhood. And so all of these things just were happening simultaneously. And when the pandemic hit, I had more free time, and so that was sort of the impetus. But it was the most cathartic thing I've ever done.
Wow.
And I wanted to give my father his roses while he's still alive. So it's a love letter to my dad. It's a love letter to fatherhood. It's a story of resilience and overcoming addiction. It's a story of forgiveness as well. My dad, even after he got clean, we would talk like this, and rarely a conversation would pass where he didn't talk about the guilt that he felt, and he would cry and just talk about how bad he felt about being absent. And even when he was present, he was drunk, hungover, or sleeping. But I wanted him to know that we've all forgiven him, and so that was part of it.
Now, with your dad, did you forgive him easier when you had kids? Because we talk about this all the time. Like, you're mad at your dad for things you don't understand until you start having your own kids, right? Even to my kids now, like, me and my kids go to him. I'm sure my kids say they hate me at times because you're overprotective, right? And my dad, being a retired police officer, was overprotective. But now I'm on like that with my kids, and I understand completely why my dad wouldn't let me go to certain things and take certain, trains or go to this party. So did you feel that when you started to have kids and be like, I need to patch this up now?
Precisely. Envy. We're hard on our parents.
That's right.
We're hard on our parents, but we're hard because, when you're 10, 15, 20, you don't know. You haven't experienced the world. You don't really have perspective. You just know you want to go out to this party, or you want to go see this girl, or you want to be what teenagers want to be. And it's not until you get older and you have children and you realize that your primary responsibility is to protect them from the world. Right. And I was hard on my dad for a different reason, because back then, the way we view lots of things now, whether it's mental health. But with regards to addiction, back then, we didn't view addiction as a sickness.
Not at all.
You were lazy.
You thought he was being selfish.
Right.
Yeah, he cared about whatever than us, more than us.
Yes, right. If you really wanted to get the monkey off your back, you could. But now, knowing what we know, having covered so many stories related to addiction, 5-10 years ago, I started to look at it like we look at it now, like a disease, an illness. So I was hard on my dad for that reason. So I was angry and resentful, and it got to a point where I was, I'm a firm believer in therapy as well. And my therapist a couple of years ago finally, had been suggesting it for a number of years, but suggested that I make peace with it and forgive my father. Not for my father, but for me. Right. And so all of that led to this.
I, too, learned to forgive my father in therapy, because I realized that my father was just doing the best he could. And he was working with the tools that he had at the time.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with substance abuse and his own mental health issues, he really did a lot for somebody with a lot of those problems.
To that point, Charlamagne, my dad, and I didn't know this until I was writing the book. The first line of the book is, my dad was born in a federal prison in West Virginia. He didn't even know who his dad was until he was almost a teenager. So imagine growing up, not knowing who your dad is, having other kids pick at you. They would call him a jail baby and all this stuff, and having other kids pick at you. It shapes and molds you in ways that you don't fully appreciate until you're much older.
That's right.
So he grew up that way, and when he found out who his dad was, it's not like his dad took an active interest. I asked him, and it's in the book. I asked him during the interview with my dad. I said, What's the most money you ever wasted without missing a beat? My dad said, $2,500. I said, $2,500 on what? He's like, that's how much it cost to put my daddy in the ground, 1986. Damn. Yeah, that was my reaction. And he proceeded to explain how his father was a deadbeat, and so my dad did exponentially better than his father.
That's right.
And I would say we're probably doing a little bit better than our dads.
That's what life is about, though, right?
Yeah. Well, if
you got to pass the
right.
batons.
If you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Our dads all, back then especially, like black fathers in the South. And my dad worked third shift at the post office. And he worked third shift because you make a little extra money. Weekends, holidays, no vacations, to provide, to get us to the middle class.
That's right.
And I didn't appreciate it and respect it until all of a sudden we're forced to provide for children.
In the book you talk about how your father had a gambling addiction as well as liquor. I mean, that is really like mirrors my father. But it took a lot of OGs. Those two things took a lot of OGs in South Carolina down a bad path. Do you think they got caught up because it was nothing else to do?
Yeah, you're right. And especially video poker. A lot of folks outside South Carolina don't realize the scourge that video poker was back in the 80s and 90s in South Carolina. I mean, it was a $2 billion industry, and you go in and you press some buttons and you're playing like poker with a computer. And my dad would go in on a Friday, and he, like, not an exaggeration, he'd blow his whole paycheck on playing, like, video poker for 6 hours. You know, tall boy in one hand, video poker in the other. Like,
tall boy.
Oh, yeah.
You know what a tall boy is?
I have no idea what a tall
Come on!
That's like how many ounces of beer? What is it?
At least 24.
22, 24? Yeah.
Tall boy, like a Budweiser tall.
Still in the brown paper bag.
Oh, yeah.
Called 40 to 22 ounce, but I never heard of tall boy.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, anyway, Pops he would have a couple tall boys. And so, but no, and his friends, to your point, like that was, and it wasn't typically just one addiction. It was booze and gambling, or booze and women, or booze and my dad, you know, but to his credit, gave up gambling, gave up drinking. In November, he was in the hospital for 5 days. We thought it was COVID. Thankfully, it wasn't. He had bacterial pneumonia. Doctor comes in, Mr. Melvin, how much do you smoke? He said, what do you mean? He's like, in a given day. He said, I'm probably down to a pack a day. He'd been a pack a day smoker for 40 years. Doc says, well, Mr. Melvin, you're going to have to stop smoking. I said, okay, all right. Hadn't had a cigarette since. Wow. Willpower, I don't necessarily possess, but yeah, no, he's given up all of his vices.
That had to be like a emotional roller coaster for you, though, because, you know, your father got clean, and, you know, thank God everything was good for him in November, but then you lost your brother in December.
Yeah. To colon cancer.
Man.
Get checked, get screened, listen to your body. And
How old was he?
He was diagnosed at 39. He died at 43.
That's crazy. Because, you know, most of the times they tell you don't need to get checked until you're 45.
Yes, and that was the guidance that we were all operating under, and so was he. And here's the thing, you know, I will occasionally have a drink or two. He never drank,
Wow.
never smoked. Played football in college. Like, he was Baptist minister. I mean, was living the ideal life, and then all of a sudden he started having some problems with his stomach, went to his doctor. Doctor said, no, it's probably your diet, you know, prescribed more fiber. And then it went back 2 weeks later because it didn't improve. Said, oh, it's probably an ulcer. And then finally 2 weeks later he goes back, and the doctor, I'm not going to name his name, but a doctor in South Carolina, in rural South Carolina, the doctor says, well, you know, we'll do a CT scan just to rule out, you know, everything else. And they do the CT scan, and Charlamagne, the doc comes out, and it's like, tangerine-sized tumor in your colon. We should probably go ahead and put you on hospice. And he calls me up, and, you know, I'm like, that can't be. So we get a second opinion. Second opinion's the same, and we get him out to MD Anderson in Houston. And God forbid you ever get diagnosed with a cancer. If you do, that's where you want to go. And they bought my brother easily 3 years. To spend with his children, who are a year older than mine, both of his kids. It's when, and I write about it in the book, but when you have someone that you care about, someone that you love, and you see them suffering on a regular basis, and by the time he slipped away in December, it was hard. It was hard to watch him. You stop praying for a miracle, and you start to ask God to have mercy, which is what we did. But I remember toward the end of the book writing process, I write about him in chapter 6 and our dynamic, and I wanted him to sign off on it. And what I'd written obviously was going to have to change because he wasn't going to make it. It became apparent in November, and so I go in there and I'm a blubbering mess. I'm reading his story back to him and all this, and I get to the end. I said, I stopped. At this point, he's in his bed, and he can't really speak a whole lot. And he's on the oxygen, and I said, what'd you think? He said, oh, man, you remember a lot. And that was it. What was that?
Wow.
And I said, well, is it accurate? You know? I said, yeah, it's accurate. But, you know, it's funny because I think when you're a man of faith, which he was, your perspective on the end, it's different, perhaps from ours. Like I'm afraid of death. I admit it readily.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm afraid of death as much as I'm afraid of leaving too early. You know, we got young kids, you know what I mean, our wives, you know what I mean?
Like, me and you both.
Once I get to 90 something, I'm not going to feel that way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm afraid now, not because of myself, but because what I have behind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I got 5 kids. I got a wife, and I got a whole bunch of people that depend on me.
That's right.
Like when I turn 80, 90, it's more I understand and I'm ready. But right now, I'm like, I got too much to make sure that they go down the right way.
I want to see my kids get older.
That's right.
See grandkids, walk my daughter down the aisle. You know, I want to do that stuff. You said 90. I've settled on 82. I figure that's
too young, Craig.
No, I'm good at it. Because you know what happens to a lot of folks in their 90s? It's, first of all, you're not in great health. I mean, if I can still be in great health and have, mental acuity, that's one thing. A lot of their friends have died, the spouse is dead. Like, you're just out in the world by yourself, relying on other people to change your diapers and feed you. You don't want to live like that.
It depends on your health, like you said. Like if I'm 82, 85, and I can still do things on my own, I'm good. And a lot of times I see those type of people. I see those people.
Look at Cicely Tyson. Cicely Tyson was doing interviews a week before she passed.
But she's an exception to the rule.
I think we can all be that if we take care of ourselves.
That's the problem.
I don't want to stay on this because I don't want to keep the energy down. But do you have anything planned for your brother's kids since it's their first Father's Day this weekend?
We'll FaceTime. We'll talk. But we've our family is very tight, so we've taken them into the fold. And when you lose your parent at an early age, my nephew is 8. That's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. So other folks go and step in and fill the gap.
Yeah,
rest in peace to Lawrence.
Absolutely. And I was gonna say another fear of mine is, a lot of times we don't remember 8 years old. We don't remember 9. We don't remember 10. We don't remember 5. And that's a fear that if something happens, will my kids remember me? Will they remember Dad taking them to their softball games and taking them to soccer and having conversations and us doing stupid stuff outside? Will they remember that? That's one of my biggest fears.
Your kids will remember.
I hope so.
Oh, and here's the thing. They also have the beauty of the internet because, they can pull up DJ Envy clips from like 25 years. Like
I don't want that for my kids. I don't want them to see Daddy like that, please. That was a different.
But they will. Like,
I know.
How old is your oldest now?
12, about to be 13.
Oh, she's already doing it.
Oh, I know.
She's Googling Daddy. Dad, you said, Dad, you
man.
Really? Dad? Oh, yeah. Oh, you know it. You know it. I'm surprised she hadn't asked you about some of it.
She'd be asking my wife. I'm not.
What did she ask about? What's the craziest?
I don't even be wanting to know, but I'm not afraid to have the conversation. It's just getting weirder now because even this weekend I hosted. I was in Miami hosting a YouTube TikTok event, and it was a boxing match. So my daughter texted me like, "Are you hosting an event tonight?" And I'm like, "What did she ask me about hosting something before?" And she was like, "Is it a YouTube? It's the YouTube TikTok thing." I'm like, "Yes." How do you know that? She's like, "All my friends are telling me." I'm like, "Oh,
that's how old you are now."
Yeah, man. Or even the other day when Logan Paul fought Floyd Mayweather, she wanted to watch the fight. Because of Logan Paul. I'm like,
Did you let her watch it?
No.
Oh, okay, good. That's good. That was the answer I was hoping for.
No.
Because I have found with my children, I find that I'm not the kind of parent that our parents used to be. We're far more permissive than our parents were. Like, when I was a kid, like you ate whatever was presented for dinner. No options.
Right.
Like that was it. Mom made spaghetti. Oh, guess what?
Like it or not, meatballs, stuff that
right.
I hated.
Yeah. Liver and onions. Oh, it's liver and onions
ate
night.
it.
My kids now, it's dinner time. It's like, I don't want pasta tonight. Oh, I don't want chicken fingers. And I find myself, and sometimes my wife is like, oh, well, what do you want? We get up, we're making pasta. Because we want to.
Take it a step further. My son will be like,
I'm going to call Uber Eats.
I'm going to do Uber Eats, Dad.
Yep.
It'll be here in 30 minutes. You want something?
Right. But I justify it in my head by saying, I just want to keep peace. I just want to keep peace in my house. And if that keeps peace, then, my son at 4, like I'll never forget, we had some Fage yogurt. And, Fage, that's like $2 yogurt. At least back then, it's probably up to $2.50, $3. Anyway, he was, he's become a fan of the Fage, sometimes the Fage with the fruit. And then at some point discovered Chobani. I came home one day and it's like, I don't want Fage yogurt. I'd like Chobani. And for whatever reason, that particular day, he caught me in a bad moment. I said, son, you don't understand. Like when I was younger, there wasn't yogurt.
Word.
Like, we didn't have yogurt. Like, we couldn't, much less Greek yogurt. Like, maybe you'll play. And he's decided all of a sudden he's a connoisseur of Greek yogurt. And so I said to him, I was like, no more Greek yogurt. That was my solution. I'm going to change his taste buds, cut him off from Greek yogurt. And it lasted maybe 3 days. Until my wife was like, why can't he have yogurt?
Why can't he have yogurt?
I was like, he doesn't understand how expensive yogurt is.
That's right.
You know, everything becomes a battle. But we are rearing soft children. Like, we're not rearing resilient children.
But I also think that, and this is a conversation I've had with Charlamagne, I think because of that, because of what we're doing as parents now, I think we're creating a soft child and a soft world.
Are we creating soft children or cultured children?
I think it's soft.
Children
man.
should have options. We didn't have options because we were poor.
That's true. But
You know
but you
what
can
I
also
mean?
have too many options.
Yes.
You think?
And here's the thing:
it's
if you
too spoiled at times.
and if you aren't asked to ever overcome anything, when life presents you with a legitimate challenge, why would we expect you to be able to overcome that? Because we've smoothed the road out so much.
Yes.
That all of a sudden,
I think you should talk to your therapist about trauma responses because that sounded like a trauma response.
it was.
Why do we think we have?
was.
Why do we think our kids have to struggle because we struggled? Life is not about struggle.
Have to struggle, but the fact that the young man said, "You know what? I don't want this. I want this type of yogurt.
What's wrong with
And if
that?
I can't get this type of yogurt, I'm not eating it."
Tell you what's wrong
That's
with that.
a problem.
Daddy
was
works
6.
hard.
He was 6 and he doesn't have a job. That's what's wrong with that.
6 and he doesn't have a damn
Right.
job.
That's what's
the same way.
That's what's wrong with
My
that.
mother threw spinach on there, and I hated spinach. And she said, "You gonna eat it, and you're not gonna leave this table until you ate it." And you know what I
Right.
did? I ate it, or I threw it in the toilet.
Lord have mercy.
And don't let you mumble something under your breath.
Exactly. Now these kids will be like, "I don't want to order Uber Eats." That's soft. And then when they don't get it, I'm sure he cried.
Yeah, initially it did. But you know, but it's a constant struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you deal with it?
I mean, listen, it is a balance, but I realize that, I work hard so they don't have to struggle. And they're going to have their own struggles. They're just going to be different from ours. I don't know what their struggles are going to be. It'll probably be high-class struggles, but
Right.
it's still struggles
I
nonetheless.
think we're creating.
I don't want my kids to go through what I went through.
No, I don't either. But I want them to understand that they can. But think about it like
You want
this.
them to appreciate
I
that.
want them to
Yes.
appreciate
Yes,
it.
yes.
My daughter, she goes to NYU, right? And I said that, look for apartment. You did your first year, look for apartment. She sends me back apartments.
You're older than you look. I didn't realize you had a daughter at NYU.
I got a daughter 19.
Wow.
19.
Man, you holding up well. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're holding up well.
Sure. I mean, Envy's been around I've been listening to Envy for 20 years. I didn't realize.
I had my first daughter, I think, at 22.
Wow.
So 21.
So she's in NYU.
She's 19. She sends me all these apartments with spa. There's a spa downstairs. There's views, Dad. There's a full-time. I'm saying, like, you're going to college.
Right.
My college was $299 a month was my apartment, and I had to share it with a roommate. Now, you don't think that's...
But now, I would say if she's sending you those listings, clearly you've created an expectation
That's right.
with your daughter that
But I have a job.
that's true.
I have 19 jobs.
Yes.
She doesn't. And I got to the point where I told her no, but I didn't tell her no because I couldn't afford it. I told her no because I felt like she shouldn't have that at 19.
That's important.
That's just how I felt. I felt like it took me 20 years to be able to get that, and you shouldn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong for that? Am I creating a problem? She's gonna be depressed now and be all upset because she does it's making a soft kid. I feel like.
I agree, and it's a battle that, maybe that's part of it. I mean, maybe it's at some point we should put our foot down.
You know what this sounds like? Because when I read your book, and it's something I knew, but it just reinforces it. The thing about fatherhood is really on-the-job training. Like, do you think it's something you can ever truly learn to do?
No,
Yeah.
no, it's a journey, not a destination. And because the kids are different. Like, you've got your three girls, they're all different. My son and daughter, they're very different. And as they get older, they present new challenges, I understand. I think I have found, though, and this is something I know our fathers didn't do, you start talking to other fathers, you start talking to other dads, you realize no one's doing it right. Like, no one's mastered this.
Right.
But it's Carson Daly. He's part of the Today Show, and he gave me some advice a couple years ago that's always stayed with me. He said, at some point, you realize that everyone's sacrificing something. Either you're sacrificing time, you're sacrificing money, you're sacrificing something. Mm-hmm. You make peace with that, and you decide you're going to focus on quality over quantity.
That's right.
So I'm going to miss some stuff. I'm not going to be at some Little League games, some soccer games. Maybe I'll miss a recital here and there because I've got to work. But when we are together, I'm present. I'm there. Mm-hmm. I'm not on the cell phone. and we're going to take great trips, great vacations. We're going to make memories that last, and that's always something that stayed with me.
What did your father learn about you that he didn't know when y'all were writing this book, doing these interviews?
It's funny you should ask me that, because we talked about this at the end of the process. I don't think he knew. Scratch that. I know he didn't know how angry and resentful I was when I was younger, but he also did know how proud I was of what he has overcome and the man he's become, and he didn't know that because I didn't tell him that, and that's one of the reasons I wanted him to read this book, and it's a it's a love letter to him. And when I went to visit him at rehab down in Statesboro, Georgia, first you go and you have to have the group counseling and it's a thing. And so I go to the front door, and he comes out and gives me this big hug, and he's crying. My dad's not a man of great emotion. I start crying, and big embrace. He gives me this letter. 40 years, my father had never written me a letter. And he gives me a letter, and we go and we sit and have breakfast and go about our day, and we do the therapy, and I had to fly back for work, and I get in the car and I read the letter, and it's his story, and he had at the beginning of therapy, I guess, decided that he needed to explain himself, and he explained all of it. How he came to be the man that he was, how he came to be the man that he was not. His father wrote about all of it, and wanted me to have it. And I keep it in the safe. It's one of my most treasured possessions. But it's wild to think. And again, part of it is on me. But it's wild to think that someone in their late 60s who struggled mightily with the addictions that he struggled with can decide late in life that he wants to do better and be better for his kids and for his grandkids primarily. Like, I see my dad now with his grandchildren. I'm like, who is that man? Like, he's riding bikes and out shooting hoops with my son. Like, it's the human spirit is something. Like,
you know what I love about it? I love the fact that he's doing it because of what's happening here on Earth. A lot of people get right at the end of their life because of what they think is going to happen in the afterlife. But he's like, no, I want to get right because of what's happening here on Earth in this moment.
Yes, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. And he talks about his faith a little bit in the book. We used to go to church. I mean, I grew up in the church, and Dad would never go. And I asked him. We talked a fair amount about that. And he finally, and it made perfect sense when he explained it. He's never had a great deal of patience for hypocrites, and he found in the church a lot of the folks who were there on Sunday were the same folks that he was drinking with or shooting craps with on Saturday, and a lot of the folks who were in the choir were the same folks who were out, cheating on their wives, and he didn't have patience for that. He just So it's.
I get it.
Yeah, I got it. I got it after you explained it. I didn't get it, when I was 15. I was like, why doesn't Dad have to go to church 3 times a week like we do? But it's. I learned a lot.
You describe your father as a ghost.
Oh yeah, that was a nickname one of my friends gave him. I won't say her name because we're still friends. But no, because when you're growing up, kid, parents are showing up for events, and my mom was always there. Sometimes there a little too much, but my dad was never there. When he started playing video poker, there was a place called Tom's Party Shop where he would usually play, which is about a mile away from the house. And if you were coming to Columbia High School on the school bus, you could always see what was happening at Tom's Party Shop. My dad drove a 1973 Pontiac Le Mans. He was the only person in America probably driving a bright green 1973 Pontiac Le Mans in 1992. And so anytime someone saw the car, they knew it was my dad. So kids would be coming on the school bus or driving to school, and they'd see, at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, there's my dad playing video poker, drinking his tall boys at Tom's Party Shop. And so one of my friends one morning was like, "Hey, I saw your pops up at Tom's Party Shop. He's like a ghost. Like, sometimes you'll see him real fast and he's gone and blah, blah, blah." It's like, "I've never seen your dad's face." And she was right. She's telling the truth, but she nicknamed him the Ghost, and it was a nickname that stayed, and it came to represent later in life kind of who he was to me, kind of there physically, but not really there emotionally or mentally or any other way for that matter.
You know, that's so important, man, because, you know, one thing, even reading your book, and I realized with fathers, it's like that's what you want from your father, right? Like, you want that emotion. Like,
Yes.
I feel like for my life, all I got was discipline.
Yes.
From my dad. Not real emotion, not real love.
Yes.
Do you feel like you're getting that now from him?
Now I am.
Okay.
Yeah. But to your earlier point, Charlamagne, I mean, we got that because that's what they knew. They weren't capable. They were not capable of being the kind of dads that we wanted them to be, that we needed them to be. They just didn't have the tools in the toolbox. But I didn't realize that until later in life.
Yeah.
So yes, I get that now. From my dad now, you know, he'll FaceTime at 2 in the afternoon. He's retired. He'll FaceTime at 2 in the afternoon. He's like, "Oh, what's going on? What are you doing?" It's like, I'm at work, Pops. I can't, you know. But I always answer the call, and one thing I love about my dad, unlike my mother, whom I love, that's a separate book, but he never keeps you on the phone too long. Like, it's 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes if it's something serious. That's it. So that's why I can talk to him every day. Mom calls. You know, it's 40 minutes. Like, you can't rap Mom. So, but he calls, he just checks in, and always ends with, "I love you."
I love you, man.
I love you.
Absolutely.
I was probably 20, maybe college graduation before I heard my dad say "I love me."
I never heard it as a kid.
No,
Ever.
no.
Really?
And it's, you know, and hugs.
Oh,
Man, there was no hugs. Like, it was, you start hugging, like, what's going on with you?
Really?
No demonstrations of affection. No, that was not, again, I think a lot of it goes back to cultural and generational, but no, my dad, now, you know, every time you see him, he's hugging, and I mean, it's just it's
a good thing.
Yes.
Evolution.
And anyone's capable of it. That's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book. Like, and it's also about, you know, a lot of times in our families, you have people who struggle with things. You write them off. Sometimes you do it consciously. Sometimes you do it, you know, subconsciously. But you write them off. You kind of put them in a corner. That's just who they are. That's who they're going to be. You just don't deal with them. And we did that with my dad for 20 years off and on. And that was time that we probably could have had back, but, you know. Whatever. By the way, I watched this show and listened to it. I didn't realize how therapeutic it was. I mean, this is cheaper than therapy.
That's why we have good long form conversations.
This is great.
Conversations.
You could charge people to come in here and, like,
Gotta be against the law, but yeah, this is just
That's
good
true.
conversation.
What was it like to really interview your father? And the reason I ask that, because having real vulnerable conversations with your dad, no matter how old you are, is so difficult. Like, it's conversations I want to have with my pops right now that I still haven't even, you know, got the courage to have yet. So how was it having that real, vulnerable, honest conversation?
One of the highlights of my life, and it's going to be a great gift for my kids and grandchildren and great grandkids one day, because we've got like hours of these recordings of me doing what you're doing right now, just asking questions. And a couple times I had to remember I was a journalist and take off my son hat. But it was, I had to work up to the serious stuff. Like, I started with, you know, just sort of when did this happen, or how did this happen? And then, you know, it became apparent after about the first hour, he wanted to talk. Like, he had been waiting for years on some of these questions about his relationship with his wife, with my mother, how that came to be. Like, for instance, I write about it in the book. There's this picture of me at their wedding reception. I was born in 79. They got married in 82. And I'm at the wedding reception. I'm in a little blue suit. I've always seen this picture, and I was like, oh, wow, it's part of the big day. I asked my dad about the wedding reception. In the course of our interview, he was like, wedding reception? We didn't have a wedding reception. I was like, no, I've seen these pictures. I was there. He's like, no, that wasn't a wedding reception. And proceeds to explain how on their wedding day, my mom wanted a traditional wedding. He didn't want to have anything to do with that. And his cousin had to convince him to go to the party that she threw after like a week or two after they got married at the courthouse. I didn't know any of that. I'm 42 years old. I never knew my parents' origin story. And
Same.
and you know, and in my mind, you know, in our minds, we create these stories.
Yeah.
And then you start talking to Dad, and it's like, oh, I mean, and then, you know, deep stuff like, oh, why'd y'all stay together? Because I mean, there were years where they were both miserable, and he was very honest about why. And it's, but you also, you know, there were a couple times during the course of the interviews where I was asking questions, and I was like, maybe I don't want to know the answer to that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's, but.
I wanted you to dig a little deeper on how your relationship with your father affected your relationship with women. And the reason I say that is because my father, you know, infidelity all throughout the marriage. I remember even approaching my pops one time about cheating on my mom and him saying to me, "You only got one woman? One day you gonna understand." So it's just like, that's a real mind fuck. So you go from either saying to yourself, okay, I gotta have multiple women, because that's what Pops said.
Right.
Or I gotta be the exact opposite of my Pops, because I don't want to, you know, ruin my family the way my Pops ruined his. So I just wondered, you know, did it have any impact?
It did. And that was actually one of the reasons I started therapy in my 20s. Was because I found myself incapable of having meaningful, substantive relationships. And I started talking to a therapist, and she quickly helped me realize that one of the major reasons was because, you know, my father, for a variety of reasons, a lot of which related to the addiction, he didn't treat my mother very well. And he didn't. And would acknowledge that. I'm not saying anything that he didn't say to me. But again, it goes back to what we were talking about. Like, he didn't know how to be a good husband.
That's right.
He didn't see, you know, he had 3 siblings. My grandma was, you know, at one point in her life was running liquor, running numbers, you know, did a couple stints in prison for it. And so that's what he saw growing up. And so he didn't see his mother treated well. He consequently didn't treat, you know, my mother very well. I saw that growing up, and I just came to understand that that's, you know, that was the dynamic between husband and wife. So that should be the dynamic between, you know, boyfriend and girlfriend. So I probably owe a number of women from my 20s, maybe early 30s, an apology.
And what did your father say about your relationship when you decided to settle down and get married?
I remember vividly on my wedding day when you look to your dad for some sage wisdom, you know, doing your tie. I remember being in the bathroom, and I said, I think I maybe even teed him up for it. And I remember him saying vividly, "Listen, you know, we don't do divorce." That was it. That was the.
that was a long conversation.
That was it. We don't do divorce.
This is permanent.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That was. No, but that's one thing about Dad. Like, even before I got married, there were a couple young ladies that I dated seriously, and he always.
I remember one.
You please don't.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Please don't do that, Envy. Don't look over there.
Nah, I'll leave him alone.
Please, thank you.
Goodness gracious.
Thank you. But he always took to him. Like, he was always far nicer to my girlfriends than me, and far nicer than my mother was. So no, but you, again, when you know better, you do better.
That's right.
And we know better, and thank God for it. Think about how well adjusted our children are going to be.
I hope so, because I mean, like you said, it's you're on the job training.
Right? Yes.
You know what I mean? So I find myself really questioning things that I said, things that I did, you know what I mean? Because I remember the things my father said to me when I was young that stuck with me forever.
Yeah.
That traumatized me forever. I mean, it might have been something small to him, but stuck with me. So I'm really, really, really conscious of, like, what I say, what I do to them.
That self-awareness that you have, I'd like to think that on my good days I have it as well. Our parents didn't have it. They didn't have it, and it's not, you know, they have it now. My dad does, again, therapy. But back then they didn't have it, and it made me angry, and it was just if you stop and think about it really is kind of remarkable how quickly, as a society, we've come to realize the error of our ways. Like we're not that old. I mean, that was just 20, 25 years ago. And look at it. Like now, I think people get it. Mm-hmm. Most people.
What could you have done this book without therapy?
No.
Without all those years of therapy?
Yeah. No, because you keep the stuff bottled up and you just walled off. And I also, up until the last few years, didn't always see the value in sharing stories. Like you don't go putting your family's business out there. And then you do this long enough and you realize that the platforms that we have, the megaphones that we have, those can be used for great good. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, a lot of folks use them for nonsense, but they can be used for great good. You've done a lot of that. I mean, with destigmatizing mental health. And so I came to realize, not to get to whatever, I think that God calls on us to do certain things at certain times in our life. And I firmly believe that right now, one of his callings is for me to talk about addiction. And what it does to families and overcoming it. And it's because it's not just the person who's struggling with it. It's the kids,
That's right.
It's the spouse, it's all so the idea was when I sat down to put pen to paper, the idea was to use this to do some good. That was it. To do some good.
Well, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. That's it. Now it is it'll be Father's Day this weekend. So how would you define yourself as a father, Mr. Melvin?
Oh, man, y'all are good at this question asking thing. I sometimes forget. It's also not always fun to be on the other side either. I'll tell you that much.
It's not a question, it's a conversation.
Yeah, but still questions. How would I? That's a good question, Charlotte. Let me think. Let me actually stop and think about my answer before I just. How would I describe myself as a father? Permissive, perhaps too much so sometimes. Fun. Again, my kids are young, so I can, we a lot of rolling around the floor, a lot of wrestling with my son. I'd like to think, as a father, I'm firm when my kids do something or say something that worries me. If I catch one of them like being nasty or mean to the other, I use that as a teachable moment because I'm determined not to rear a sociopath or a psychopath. I'd also like to think, Charlamagne, as a dad, I listen a lot. I engage them in substantive conversations every day, like to force them to think. And because ultimately what I want, and I've talked about this a fair amount and I write about it in the book, I don't want to be my kid's best friend. I have no interest in that. Nothing good comes from that. But I do want them to think that I should be the first call or text when something's wrong. Or if someone has hurt them, or they're scared, or they're worried, I want to have that kind of relationship with my children that we didn't have, where they can come to me first and not go out into the world first. So I think that's the kind of dad I'm trying to be. Some days I'm better at it than others. Did I answer your question? Did I feel?
Yeah, and I actually think the definition will change. It
has to.
It's going to change. You got young kids. It's going to change when they get in their teens. It's going, It's going to constantly change. It's going to constantly evolve. So,
and my dad always say, fun, firm, and fair.
That's good.
That's what he said. He says, I'm a fun dad. I'm firm, but I'm fair. And that's what I try to be with my kids: fun, firm, and fair.
How old are yours again?
I got 5.
I know.
19.
Can you remember
17.
the ages of all of them?
Yeah, 19, 17, 8, 7, and 4.
Wow. That is impressive.
And one on the way.
And you look so well rested. One on the way?
One on the way. Number 6.
6 kids?
I have 6, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, you know what it is I tell everybody I love my kids. Like, I love doing things. I never get tired of it. And the reason I even work so hard is because I do it for them. I want to set up things that I didn't have as a child. I want to set up companies, set up wealth for them, and I enjoy it. Like, I take my kids everywhere with me. If I got a show somewhere in Vegas, the whole family goes.
It's all 6. I see that explains why you have so many jobs. I always wondered why does he work so hard? He's been doing this so long.
But I love it. I take my kids to work. Like, when I leave here, I'll pick up my son from school. We'll go to my office. He'll watch me do real estate. I explain to him real estate.
Yeah.
I got arcade games at my office. He plays the games. He goes back and forth. He'll tell me we'll go look at a house and see how bad a house is, and he'll ask crazy questions like, Dad, how do the kids in this neighborhood play with all the glass on the floor? So I got to explain them the different areas and what we're trying to do to clean up. So I enjoy it, man. It's totally fun. It's totally fun.
That's a reality show to watch, by the way.
It's totally fun.
Did you plan this for it to come out the week of Father's Day?
The publisher did.
Wow.
The publisher.
Okay.
The publisher
That's God's divine timing. It's perfect.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's a great book.
Pick it up.
I hope that all of us continue to be, generational curse breakers.
Absolutely.
And all of us, realize that we are too hard on our parents, especially our fathers, and our fathers just did the best they could with what they had, and it's up for us just to, do better.
I'm proud of you, by the way.
I'm proud of you too, man. I'm literally, every time I see you on TV, I'm like, man, that's my guy, Craig. But, when you think about that article from the SC State newspaper back in 03-04 when they named us 2 of the top 10 media personalities in South Carolina, and the dog was licking your face on the grass, and to see us come to where we've come to now, it's like, wow, it's surreal.
Please don't do that.
I'm gonna put it in the video.
Please don't do that.
And salute to my guy Otis Taylor Jr. Otis did that article back in the day.
Your memory is long too.
I don't forget stuff like that because it meant something to me then, and it still means something to me now because Otis saw something in us that we may not have saw in ourselves.
He did. Back in the day.
So go get my man Craig Melvin's book, Pops, Learning to Be a Son and a Father. It is the perfect Father's Day gift. This should be in everybody's, I'm about to say Father's Day stockings. There's no Father's Day stockings.
There should be, though. There should be Father's Day stockings. Someone should start that.
That's right. It's a great Father's Day gift for the weekend, man. Go get that.
And what was the dog's name that kissed you on your mouth?
Trouble.
Trouble.
God rest his soul.
All right.
Rest his soul.
It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.